Werewolf Romance, Prologue. Beneath the blood-red moon, the storm raged like a living thing, wild, relentless, untamed. The ancient forest around the hidden shrine shuddered with thunder, rain lashing like whipcord against the gnarled bark of twisted oaks. Lightning tore the sky apart, briefly illuminating the desperate figures gathered beneath the stone altar, their faces etched with anguish and determination. At the center stood the Alpha, his breath ragged, body trembling with the weight of a curse older than the pack itself. His mate knelt beside him, pale and fierce, clutching a newborn whose silver eyes gleamed with otherworldly light, an unspoken promise and a heavy burden wrapped in fragile skin. The air crackled with raw power, the veil, the shadow realm that licked at the edges of their world, pressing close, hungry for escape. The Alpha's voice, ragged but unwavering, carried through the storm's roar. Only love fierce enough to burn the veil will break the chains that bind us. The mate's fingers tightened around the infant, a silent vow burning in her gaze as tendrils of shadow writhed, creeping like smoke toward the cradle. The newborn's tiny hand trembled, a delicate flicker of life caught in the storm's merciless grasp, while the shadows curled, reaching, threatening. In that moment, time fractured between worlds. The ancient curse clashed against the fierce flame of sacrifice, tethering soul to soul, life to legacy. The storm's fury echoed the tumult inside the shrine, where hope and despair danced in a fragile balance. A deep voice, rich and steady, rose above the chaos, welcoming all who dared listen. Welcome to I Love Romance Stories. Prepare to be swept away into a tale of passion, danger, and destiny. The infant's trembling hand twitched once more, shadows tightening their hold as the blood-red moon hung low, a silent witness to a bond forged in sacrifice, and the beginning of a story that would echo through the ages. Chapter 1. Mist clung to the rugged forest like a whispered secret, curling through gnarled branches and weaving around ancient stones long forgotten by the world. The ruins of the Vayne ancestral home, fractured and worn by time, stood like a ghost's lament against the endless gray sky. Here, on the fringes of Veilborn territory, Cora Vayne lived with the weight of a legacy that neither the pack nor fate had been kind enough to explain fully. Her footsteps were careful but swift, practiced from years of surviving in the wild. The crunch of dead leaves and the faint snap of brittle twigs beneath her worn boots marked her passage, but she moved with the grace of a hunted shadow, never lingering, always alert. The cold mist bit at her exposed skin, seeping through threadbare layers, yet she barely noticed. Her mind was elsewhere, tangled in restless memories and whispered warnings. Cora's silver eyes, a mirror of the infant beneath the blood-red moon so many years ago, reflected the shifting fog, glimmering with a fierce light born from frustration and quiet despair. Her blood carried the weight of a curse whispered in trembling voices around dying campfires. The Veil's curse, an ancient darkness that clawed at the edges of their world, waiting to rise again when the next silver moon bled through the night sky. But Cora was different. The pack had marked her a failure the moment she could not shift. No howl, no gleaming lupin form to command respect or fear. Instead, she bore a restless magic that flickered unpredictably in her veins, wild and untamed, making her an outcast, a threat, a mystery. Her hands trembled briefly as she traced the cracked stones of the crumbling hearth, worn smooth by generations. The ghosts of her ancestors whispered through the shadows, voices of pride and regret weaving into the chill air. Each breath pulled in the damp scent of moss and decay, mingled with the faint, lingering taste of iron, the earth's blood, ancient and unyielding. The sky darkened further, and a shiver ran along Cora's spine, though the chill had long since been familiar. Her dreams had become nightmares, visions of the veil unraveling, shadowy figures slipping through the seams between worlds, and the soft cries of a child with silver eyes trapped between light and dark. Every night, the same haunting echo clawed at her heart. Only love fierce enough to burn the veil would break the chains that bound them. Loneliness was her constant companion, yet tonight it shifted. A new weight pressed upon her skin, a presence as real and sharp as the mist itself. The hairs on the back of her neck bristled, breath catching in her throat. Something ancient stirred, a restless hunger lurking beyond the trees, watching from the shadows with eyes that gleamed like distant stars. Her pulse quickened, muscles tensing for flight or fight, but curiosity held her rooted. The forest held its breath alongside her, as if waiting for the next move in a game older than the pack, older than the moon. Cora's gaze darted through the dense fog, searching for the source, something unseen yet undeniably close. The silence thickened, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of a lone wolf, a sound both familiar and foreign in its loneliness. A flicker of silver caught her eye, movement too fluid for a simple animal, too deliberate for a trick of the light. The air grew heavier, electric with the promise of change, danger, and something dark awakening. And as the mists curled tighter around her, Cora realized she was no longer alone. The shadows shifted once more, deeper and more alive than before, drawing her into a fate bound by blood, magic, and a love that would ignite the very veil itself. Chapter 2. The storm raged like a tempest of raw fury, wind whipping through jagged cliffs where the Veilborn's stronghold stood sentinel. Black waves crashed below, swallowing the jagged rocks and spitting spray high into the bruised sky. Lightning tore the heavens open, brief, violent illumination casting long shadows over the fortress. A dark crown etched against the world's edge, cold and unyielding as its alpha. Aedan Korran returned, the weight of exile a shadow tethered to his every step. His boots struck hard stone with a quiet authority, echoing through the ancient halls that once knew his command. The fortress walls, scarred by time and battle, seemed to breathe with memories, of loyalty and treachery, of power seized and lost. His gaze, sharp and pale as winter ice, cut through the storm like a blade honed by bitter experience. Behind those eyes, fierce wounds simmered beneath the surface, betrayals that had fractured his soul and a pack torn apart by deceit. The chill in the air mirrored the cold knot of doubt coiled in his chest, the fear that reclaiming what was lost might only bring more ruin. The veil's shadows clung to him like a second skin, a dark gift and curse born from blood spilled in secret rites long ago. They whispered promises of strength, whispered warnings of the price it demanded. This power, uneasy and wild, set him apart, a weapon that could save the pack or shatter it forever. His breath steamed in the frigid air as he climbed the narrow ramparts, eyes scanning the wild horizon where sea met sky in furious dance. Somewhere beyond the storm's reach, threads of fate twisted tight, threads bound to the girl with silver eyes, to the ancient curse woven through their bloodline. The air thickened with an uneasy pulse, a shiver that ran beneath stone and bone. His instincts, honed sharp by years of exile and survival, prickled with warning. The veil itself seemed to stir, breathless and restless, shifting in unnatural rhythms no storm could explain. In the command hall, flickering torchlight cast long shadows across weathered faces gathered in tense silence. Scouts and sentinels, pack elders and warriors, their voices hushed as a messenger arrived, eyes wide with alarm. The report was a blade through the fragile calm. Unnatural disturbances near the ruins of Vayne homestead. Shadows twisting beyond natural law. Signs of something sinister awakening in the wilds where the outcast girl lived. Aedan's jaw tightened, muscles coiling beneath his leather. The name, Cora, echoed through his mind, a fragile thread linking the darkness to the hope buried deep within the pack's fractured heart. The weight of destiny pressed down, heavier than the storm-laden sky. To reclaim his birthright, to face the ghosts of past mistakes, he would need more than power. He would need courage to confront the darkness and a fierce love fierce enough to burn the veil itself. The fortress trembled as thunder rolled across the cliffs, a wild symphony heralding the storm to come. And somewhere in the shadows, the veil watched and waited. Chapter 3. The silver moon rose like a blade over the horizon, cleaving through the mist-heavy night with a radiance that stirred blood and bone. It cast its light in molten ribbons across the forest canopy, over the broken stone altars and weathered runes carved deep into the earth. The air shimmered with unnatural stillness, thick, watchful, as if the world itself were holding breath. Among the circle of towering pines, the sacred glade lay revealed, exposed under the ancient light. Veilborn Pack members gathered in solemn silence, cloaked in furs and ritual scars, the scent of smoke and pine resin curling through the shadows. Their eyes gleamed with reverence and fear, faces turned toward the moon that marked prophecy and peril in equal measure. At the edge of that ritual ring, Cora stood like a secret finally dragged into the light. Her hood was pulled low, her breath white in the cold, every muscle poised between fight and flight. The sigil burned faintly beneath the skin of her wrist, the one she kept wrapped, always hidden. But now, under the silver moon's gaze, it pulsed with strange warmth, an ember refusing to die. She didn't belong here. Not among them. Not after a lifetime spent in silence and exile, cast to the fringes of the territory like something too wild to tame. Yet the veil had called. Not with words, but with a pressure in the chest, a pull in the marrow, undeniable and cruel. Across the glade, Aedan emerged from the tree line, his presence as sharp and cutting as winter wind. Shadows clung to him, threading through the folds of his coat, rippling with a power just barely leashed. The pack parted for him without a word. Even now, uncertain of his claim, they remembered. An alpha once broken. An alpha returned. His gaze met hers, and the world tipped. The moment fractured. Time bent. Every heartbeat slowed into thunder. Neither moved. Neither blinked. The bond, ancient, buried, impossible, flared to life like dry tinder set to flame. Not gentle. Not tender. But violent, surging, consuming. A breath became a storm. A stare became a brand. Cora's lungs seized. Her knees threatened to fold beneath her. A pulse, not her own, beat inside her veins, deep and furious. Her skin burned, though no fire touched her. Aedan's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking with the strain of restraint. And still they didn't look away. The moonlight narrowed to a single shaft, catching the runes carved into the stones, sigils older than the pack, older than the forest. The symbols writhed, shifted. One flared, then another, until the entire circle glowed with pale silver flame. Then the wind died. Then the veil opened. It happened without warning, a shiver in the fabric of the world. A seam torn loose. The shadows in the glade thickened, lengthened, coiled. From them rose a sound, not a growl, not a howl, but a breath dragged through broken glass. Wrong. Hungry. Ancient. Cora's fingers brushed Aedan's. And the world ignited. A shockwave burst from the point of contact, silver fire screaming through the glade, hurling bodies back like leaves in a gale. The ancient stones cracked, splintered. Trees bent under the force. The moon above flared brighter, too bright, almost sentient in its scrutiny. Cora was flung to her knees, breath stolen, eyes wide with terror and awe. Aedan staggered, fists clenched, his face carved from stone and shadow. Between them, the fire lingered, silver and alive, shaped like a tether, pulsing with something neither could name. And from the trees, it came. Not holy beast. Not holy man. A shape rotted by the veil, twisted by old rage and older magic. Eyes glowed like coals sunk into flesh slick with shadow. It moved without sound, but its hunger sang in every corner of the glade. It had waited. For this moment. For this bond. Pack warriors rallied, but their weapons faltered. Their feet refused to cross the fire's edge. Whatever had been born between Cora and Aedan existed outside the law, outside the world they knew. The entity lunged, and Cora felt her blood roar. Power surged, tearing through her limbs, her veins, her bones. For the first time in her life, she didn't resist. Didn't silence the magic. She rose with it, breath hitching on something primal and vast. Her skin glowed. Her mark bled light. Aedan stepped forward, his own shadows answering the call. The fire coiled around him, not burning but claiming. Alpha and cursed. Bound. The bond solidified, not choice, not desire, but fate. And as their hands clasped, silver to shadow, the entity shrieked in rage. The veil cracked wider. The chapter ends with the sound of stones splitting and sky weeping fire, as the shadow beast screams and vanishes into the dark, escaped, but not defeated. Waiting. Watching. Bound to them now. Chapter 4. The forest pressed in, gnarled branches weaving a cage around the path, as if the trees themselves bore witness to sins etched in bark and blood. Mist clung low to the ground, curling around their feet like wary fingers, silent and watchful. The moon was waning now, its brilliance hollowed, but its influence lingered, a low, thrumming echo in the bones of those who had stood beneath its fire. They moved side by side, though not together. Every step forward was war. Not against the terrain, but against what festered between them. Something raw and too real, forged in a bond neither welcomed, but both felt in every breath, every glance. The silver moon had done more than mark them. It had chained them, and the veil was watching. Cora kept her hands tight around the hilt of the curved blade slung at her side. The forest whispered around her, in a tongue just beyond sense, a murmur that tugged at the corners of her mind like a forgotten lullaby turned threatening. Her mark pulsed under the binding of her glove, heat blooming with each footstep that brought her deeper into the forgotten parts of Veilborn territory. Beside her, Aedan moved like shadow incarnate, silent, smooth, exiled royalty cloaked in danger. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. His silence carried weight, the kind that built walls rather than broke them. But she felt the current in him. Fury braided with purpose. Pain buried so deep it might never surface. Yet the bond, God's helped them both, bridged even silence. They followed a map scorched into brittle parchment, ink faded by time, found hidden beneath the shattered altar in the glade. Forbidden lore, sealed in blood magic, buried to be forgotten. Aedan had recognized the glyphs. Not because he had studied them, but because they were carved into his nightmares. The ruins loomed at last, a hollowed cathedral of stone and root, older than even the first Alpha's line. Trees had grown through it, bark devouring marble, vines sinking into sacred floor. Yet the bones of power lingered. The place hummed with dormant truth. Inside, the temperature dropped. The scent of iron threaded the air, old blood and old secrets. As they stepped into the open chamber, Cora's skin crawled with recognition. She'd never seen this place before, not in waking memory. But her soul shivered in knowing. Her body remembered. The way one remembers drowning. Aedan paused before a dais, the slab cracked down the middle, as if sundered by a blade too heavy for this world. Dust coated everything, except the scroll. It sat untouched, encased in a seal of veil-forged crystal that pulsed with the same silver light that had flared between their palms in the glade. Cora didn't wait. Her fingers brushed the crystal, and power bloomed, heat and ache in memory. The seal cracked without resistance, as if it had been waiting for her. As if it had known. The scroll unfurled in silence, no wind to move it. Symbols flared to life across the vellum, ancient language burning into legibility. Aedan stepped beside her, tension drawn tight across his shoulders. The words seared into them both. Only the pure flame of united souls may purge the corruption of the veil. The silence after was absolute. United souls. Not strength. Not blood. Not war. Union. And not just of flesh or magic, but of something far more dangerous. Trust. Vulnerability. The tearing down of the walls they'd both built, stone by stone, scar by scar. A weight settled in Cora's chest. Too heavy. Too cruel. The veil didn't want a champion. It wanted a sacrifice. Before she could turn away, the ground trembled beneath her boots. The air thickened, heavy with ozone and decay. From the shadows beyond the ruined columns, movement slithered, fluid and wrong. A hiss uncoiled, followed by the snap of claw against stone. Then came the creatures. Malformed. Ragged. Pulled from the veil itself. Eyes like voids. Limbs too long. They moved like smoke made solid, trailing shadow with each movement. And they were hungry. Cora didn't hesitate. Her blade came free with a hiss. Aedan was already moving, the darkness peeling from his skin like armor, the very air bending around him. They met the beasts head-on, silver and shadow colliding with things that should not exist. Blood-sprayed black foul. One creature dissolved under Aedan's grasp, his power shredding it from within. Another leapt, only to be caught midair by Cora's blade, her arm a blur of instinct and rage. But they kept coming. Endless. Born from nightmare, or from the bond now pulsing between them. A scream echoed, not from pain, but from awakening. The power in Cora surged, wild and uncontained. Her skin glowed, veins laced with silver light, and something inside her broke free. She lashed out, and the world tore open. A pulse of force blasted from her, flinging shadow beasts like rag dolls, cracking ancient stone, driving Aedan to his knees. The light burned too bright, too fast, and in its wake came silence. A single heartbeat, stretched into eternity. Then came the groan. One of the warriors, Kale, a scout who had followed them, lay crumpled against the far wall, unmoving. Blood bloomed beneath his head. His chest rose shallowly, but his pulse was weak. Too weak. Cora froze. Horror carved through her fury. Her hands trembled. Her power had done that. Not the veil. Not the beasts. Her. Aedan stared at her, not with hatred, not yet, but with something colder. Caution. Calculation. Fear. The ruins echoed with silence again, save for the ragged rhythm of breath and the whisper of her name in the shadows. Not spoken. Summoned. The veil was watching. And it was pleased. Chapter 5. Dawn came hollow and blood-tinged, dragging pale light across the ruins like a wound left open too long. The morning mist did not lift. It thickened, curdling around the broken stones and scorched earth as if mourning the power unleashed within. The taste of magic still lingered in the air, sharp and metallic, clinging to tongue and skin like the echo of a scream. The scout Kale had survived. Barely. Aedan's quick work and Cora's trembling hands had kept breath in his lungs, but silence wrapped him now. His mind lost behind the veil of unconsciousness, his body still as the stone beneath him. Cora had not spoken since. Her eyes no longer searched for understanding. Only judgment. Not from others, from herself. She walked ahead as they returned to the encampment, bootsteps muffled by moss and damp earth. The pack had set up temporary shelter beyond the border of the ruins, far enough from the taint, but close enough to strike if needed. Cora could feel them long before they came into view. The shifting tension. The held breath. The scent of fear disguised as scrutiny. They knew. Word had always moved faster than truth among wolves. Kale's collapse had turned into rumors of her losing control, of power corrupted, of dark blood awakening. Whispers built teeth. And now those whispers waited. They stepped through the line of trees, and the pack fell silent. Eyes turned, dozens of them. Some wide with awe. Others narrowed in suspicion. But the worst were calm. Measuring. Judging what she had become. What she might yet be. She kept her shoulders square, her chin high. But inside, her soul frayed. The mark on her palm pulsed beneath its glove, aching with guilt, heat rising with each breath she dared take in the face of their stares. Aedan stood at her back, not close enough to touch, but close enough to shield. His presence cut through the tension like frostbite through skin. He said nothing. Needed nothing. The weight of him was enough. For now. But protection came at a price. They retreated into the council tent, where the inner circle gathered. Alpha Aedan loomed at the head, his silver hair braided back, his stare like forged steel. Elders flanked him, aged and wary, each one marked by decades of surviving the brutal politics of Veilborn leadership. And beside them, a face too familiar. Lyra, once Cora's second-in-command, once trusted like blood, now unreadable. She bowed her head in the presence of her alpha, but her eyes never left Cora. Not accusing, not afraid, something colder. The council demanded answers. Cora gave them facts, succinct and unyielding. The scroll, the prophecy, the shadow beasts, the ruin, the flare of uncontrolled power. Her voice never broke, but inside something did. With every word she laid bare, she carved a chasm deeper between herself and the pack. The prophecy unsettled them more than the Veilspawn had. United souls. A cleansing flame. No one said what they truly feared, but it lived behind every narrowed gaze. If she was the flame, then who would be the fuel? Aedan said nothing. Not even when Aedan challenged his presence, his right to walk beside Cora, to bear the mark of her bond. The frozen air watched them all with the stillness of a predator who knew his place at the top of the chain. And yet his silence spoke. Lyra stepped forward when it ended, her voice calm, reasonable. She asked for the scroll. For safety, she said. For study. The ritual could not be risked on incomplete knowledge. Cora hesitated. The scroll had not left her side since the ruins. Bound in silver thread, sealed again in crystal. But the council demanded unity. Obedience. So she handed it over, though something in her chest twisted as Lyra's fingers brushed the casing. That night, the artifact vanished. They tore the camp apart in the hours after, searching every tent, every watchpoint, every shadow. The sentries had seen nothing. No one had breached the perimeter. No rival pack scent lingered on the air. Only one thing was certain. It had been taken by one of their own. And it had been Cora's trust that allowed it. A tremor moved through the camp. Not physical, but primal. The kind that came when foundations cracked. Factions formed in silence. Fear-fed circles of influence coiling in corners, feeding on uncertainty. Some wanted Cora stripped of command. Others wanted her banished. A few whispered worse. But it was Aedan who stepped into that gathering storm and stopped it. He stood before the campfire, the flames casting his shadow in sharp relief across the clearing. And when he spoke, his voice cut through every rising whisper like a blade through sinew. He invoked the oldest of Veilborn law, the shield right. A right once used to protect an accused until truth revealed itself. Rare. Dangerous. Binding. He offered his name. His blood. His life. To shield Cora. The fire dimmed in reverence as the right took hold, the magic old and unquestioned. None could harm her now, not without first going through him. And in doing so, Aedan made her untouchable. But not safe, because trust was no longer a shield. It was a target. Later, alone beneath the canvas of her tent, Cora stared at the flickering lantern, her thoughts unraveling. She should have felt protected. Grateful. Instead, she felt caged. Aedan's sacrifice weighed heavier than any accusation. He had bound himself to her fate, knowing what it would cost. Outside, the wind shifted. She rose just as the scent hit her, familiar, sharp wrong. Lyra. The wards around the storage tent failed in silence. A trap. A trail of glamored markings only a seer blood could weave. Cora followed. Through the trees, through shadow and silence, her feet moved fast, heart hammering, instincts flaring. She should have called for Aedan. Should have alerted the pack. But betrayal wasn't something you shared. It was something you faced alone. She found Lyra by the river's edge, moonlight catching on the scroll held open in her hands. The veil shimmered behind her, thinner here, hungry. The words Lyra whispered were not for understanding. They were for opening. A rift tore the air. The ground split beneath Cora's feet. Chains of shadow shot up, serpentine and swift, wrapping around her wrists, her throat, her soul. Veilspawn magic, summoned, not born. Crafted from betrayal. Cora screamed, but the sound vanished. The last thing she saw was Lyra's eyes. Regret. And resolve. Then the rift swallowed her whole. Chapter 6. Darkness did not come as silence. It came as hunger. The rift closed behind her with the hiss of a dying flame, the air shivering into stillness. Cold, yes, but deeper than winter. It was the cold of the in-between, where no breath echoed and no light dared linger. Not the forest. Not the mortal realm. Not even the twisted magic of the ruined sanctuary. This was the veil. And Cora was alone. She hung suspended in shadow, not falling, not rising, her body anchored by threads unseen, as if the air itself clung to her like silk spun from grief. Her limbs wouldn't obey, her voice was swallowed whole. But her mind burned, furious, radiant. The chains around her wrists were not of metal. They pulsed with runes, ancient, precise, magic carved from betrayal. Lyra's magic. And beneath the pain, beneath the fear, a deeper pulse answered. The power within her was no longer dormant. It stirred. Heat bloomed under her skin, wild and restless. Not fire, something older. Something forged in blood and oath. Her veins hummed with it. Her heart fought back against the invisible restraints, the tempo of her rage breaking through the haze of paralysis. Then a whisper. Not in words. In instinct. A presence. Cora's breath caught. Ahead, between folds of shadow and silver mist, a figure stepped from the nothing. Not man. Not wolf. More like a silhouette carved from moonlight and smoke. No features. Only the sensation of being watched by something that had always known her name. Always waited. Its presence did not threaten. It mourned. And with its gaze, visions unfurled in Cora's mind like smoke across a battlefield. Ash falling on a broken forest. A starless sky torn by crimson lightning. A silver wolf cradling a lifeless body beneath a dying moon. Her own scream swallowed by silence. Then Aedan. His hands bloodied, his eyes wild with a desperation no warrior should bear. Reaching for her. Failing. And the vision shattered. Cora gasped, lungs dragging in cold like knives. Her body dropped, gravity returning all at once, only to slam against stone carved with sigils that pulsed with cruel rhythm. She was in a chamber now, buried deep beneath the veil's skin, surrounded by walls that breathed. The floor slick with condensation and something darker. Ancient stone, laced with silver veins that twisted and curled like veins of a sleeping god. She was no longer bound, but the air weighed on her like judgment. Above, the ceiling pulsed with soft crimson light, alive, watching. Cora pressed her palm to the floor. It answered. The heat inside her surged in response. Magic unraveled in threads of light that coiled around her wrist, bleeding from the seal etched beneath her skin. Not summoned, summoning. Her body was no longer a vessel. It was a gate, and the longer she remained here, the wider it opened. Far above, across leagues of stone and shadow and blood-smeared forest, Aedan ran. His beast had broken free. The silver of his hair had deepened into frost steel, his eyes no longer simply blue, but the pale hue of an Arctic storm. Where he passed, trees bowed, frost clung to bark, and enemies fell like shattered glass. Veilspawn, twisted echoes of once human souls, came at him in waves, their forms contorted, limbs too long, mouths splitting into spirals of teeth. He tore through them, unflinching. Each kill brought him closer. Each breath carried the scent of her, distant, veiled, but unmistakable. The bond did not fade. It burned. And when he reached the mouth of the rift, where the last traces of Lyra's magic bled into the stones, he did not hesitate. He stepped into the dark. Inside the veil, time twisted. Hours stretched into heartbeats, and heartbeats shattered into eternities. Cora no longer knew how long she had been held. She only knew the chamber was changing. Its edges blurred, its sigils pulsed faster. The scroll's energy had awakened something, and that something responded to her. She was the key. But keys could also be broken. The heat inside her surged again, uncontrollable. Her thoughts fragmented. Her vision blurred with streaks of fire and gold. Her fingertips sparked as the symbols on the walls began to writhe, reacting to her unrest. Desire, anger, grief, rage. All of it fed the storm gathering in her core. Then the chamber cracked. It began with a tremor, a fracture across one of the stone runes, as if the prison had miscalculated its prisoner's strength. Light bled through the cracks, molten furious. And Aedan burst through them. His body collided with the chamber wall in a spray of shattered stone, his skin smoking from the warding spells he'd torn through. His chest rose and fell in ragged cadence, blood painting his jaw, his arms, his chest. And his eyes. They locked on her. He moved before thought. Across the chamber, through heat and ruin, he reached her. His hands caught her arms just as she collapsed. And for a single aching moment, they did not speak. They simply breathed. His grip trembled, not with weakness, but with restraint. She burned against him, wild magic spilling from her in waves, and yet he held her. Anchored her. The room groaned, splitting further. The seal beneath her skin blazed. The runes on her wrists cracked, then shattered. And then she kissed him. Or perhaps it was him. Perhaps it was both. There was no gentleness in it. No pause. No restraint. It was fire meeting ice and deciding not to extinguish, but to fuse. Her hands tangled in his hair, his fingers dug into her waist, and their bond surged like lightning uncoiled. Clothing gave way to urgency. The floor trembled beneath them as magic spilled unchecked, setting fire to stone. His mouth moved down her throat, across the hollow of her collarbone, and her skin responded with glowing runes. Marks that had no name, that did not exist before them. She wasn't afraid of the power now. Not with him. He worshipped her like a soldier at the altar of salvation. She consumed him like a queen anointed in flame. They came together in the center of chaos, bodies slick with sweat, mouths pressed against breathless promises. They didn't break the bond. They became it. And when the chamber cracked wide open and the veil screamed in protest, they rose together. Cora's magic no longer fought her. It obeyed. No longer a storm without direction, but a tide with a purpose. And then the earth above them roared. A pack. A dozen. No more. Aedan's eyes snapped up. The air shifted, his senses flaring. What had begun as rescue had become invasion. Rival packs, drawn by the scent of awakened power, circled above. The wardings were gone. The veil's wounds bled into the real world. The barrier between realms had thinned, and they were not the only ones who'd crossed it. Steel rang outside. Magic snapped like bone under pressure. The trap had become a war. And Cora. Cora was the prize. Aedan lifted her, arms bloodied, chest heaving. She didn't resist. Her hand clutched the scroll, now restored and humming with volatile energy. Her body thrummed with raw power, eyes glowing faintly, but her gaze was steady. Together they ran. But the tunnel beyond the chamber was no longer empty. Shadow-cloaked figures waited at its mouth. Not beasts. Not wolves. Witches. Each bore the mark of the veil, runes burned into bone, cloaks made from shifter skin. And at their center stood one figure, hooded still. The shadow from her vision. Waiting. Watching. Smiling. Chapter 7. The forest cloaked them in shadows and mist, a tapestry of whispering trees and damp earth that seemed to pulse with unseen energy. Each breath Cora drew trembled on the edge of the otherworldly. Her legs burned with exertion, her body humming with the volatile magic that had grown sharper since their escape. The air itself tasted of iron and impending storm. They didn't stop. Couldn't. Behind them, the screams of war still echoed, metal on bone, howl against howl, the scent of blood trailing like a curse on the wind. Aedan had fought his way through it, teeth bared, skin scorched, his wolf a savage fury that tore down every obstacle in its path to reach her. And now, with her hand clenched in his, they fled deeper into the wild, following a path known only to instinct and prophecy. Branches clawed at them, the terrain growing treacherous. The deeper they went, the more the world twisted. Trees bent unnaturally, their bark veined with a faint blue glow. Rocks bled warmth through the soles of their boots. Time staggered. The ordinary laws of nature faltered here. The veil thinned. Cora felt it in the marrow of her bones, a pressure, a call. Her magic surged like a storm tide, wild and keening, every step further unraveling her hold over it. Fire flared beneath her skin, visible now in flickers of blue-white light that danced over her fingers, curled in her palms. Her breaths grew shorter, not from exertion but from fear. Something ancient stirred inside her. Not just the wolf. Not just the magic. Something older. Aedan glanced back only once, his jaw set, a smear of blood drying across his cheek. His eyes, still that molten amber, still hers, didn't ask if she could keep going. He knew. She was no longer the frightened girl locked behind silver bars. She had burned through those chains with her bare hands. Still, the ache of power unbound made her stumble. When they reached the clearing, the world exhaled. It stretched wide and breathless, a circle of silence etched into the heart of the forest. Moonlight pooled like silver ink, undisturbed by cloud or wind. In the center, a ring of ancient stones stood, moss-covered and pulsing with quiet power. It was here the rites must be done. Here the bond would be sealed, or shattered. Cora stepped into the circle, and the ground shivered beneath her feet. Her magic reared, resisting, hungry and afraid. The veil was thinner here than anywhere else. So thin she could feel it like a second skin, brushing her thoughts, her soul. And beyond it, something waited. Watching. She didn't speak of it. Didn't tell Aedan of the shadow she'd glimpsed just before they escaped. Its eyes voids of knowing, its whisper threading into her dreams like silk on a blade. She'd felt recognition in that thing, like it knew her fate better than she ever could. Instead, she knelt at the center of the stones, sweat cooling on her brow, breath steadying. Aedan moved with purpose. He lit the sigil flames, tracing symbols in the dirt with a mixture of blood and ash. His movements betrayed no uncertainty, but the tension in his shoulders told another story. He feared what this ritual might unleash. Not from her. From himself. The bond between them crackled. It had always been there, even before their first touch, woven in the glances, the silences, the aching pull of recognition. But now it was alive. Sentient. It pressed against them both, demanding completion, demanding surrender. And yet the rites demanded honesty. As he stepped into the circle, the veil responded, trembled, then opened. For a heartbeat, the world inverted. Cora cried out, not in pain but in revelation. The forest vanished. In its place stood the veil realm, luminous, vast, and impossible. Shadows drifted like spirits, neither benevolent nor cruel, simply ancient. Stars hung within reach. Time was a spiral, past and future coiled around the present moment like predators waiting to strike. She felt everything. Her wolf surged within her, clawing to the surface, overwhelmed by sensation. Aedan's presence was the only anchor. His energy surrounded her, fierce and protective. But even he trembled now. His control waned, and she felt it, the beast beneath his skin barely chained. He reached for her. Their hands met, and the ground beneath them glowed. Magic erupted between them, not gentle or warm, but blazing, too powerful for comfort, too wild for safety. It wrapped around their wrists, climbed their arms, fused them together in a ribbon of living fire. She saw his memories. Every wound. Every lonely night. The moment he first saw her. How she had unsettled him, challenged him, awakened a hunger he thought long buried. And deeper still, the terror that he would ruin her. That his wolf, forged in battle and blood, could never be gentle enough to hold something as radiant as her soul. She showed him hers. The chains. The cell. The moment she realized she wasn't just a girl with secrets, but a being with destiny branded in her veins. The guilt of her mother's death. The shame of survival. The fury that no one had ever come for her. Until him. Aedan's body shook. His knees buckled. Not from weakness, but from the weight of truth. And then intimacy. Not just desire, though it roared through them like wildfire, hot and insatiable. But connection. A sacred binding that stripped them bare, not just of clothes or pretenses, but of every wall they'd ever built. Skin touched skin, yes, but soul touched soul. Cora gasped as their bodies met, not in lust alone, but in desperate need. The world narrowed to sensation, heat, breath, the rasp of his fingers down her spine, the bite of her nails in his shoulders. Their bond flared, overwhelmed the sigils, scorched the stones. Pleasure became pain. Pain became rapture. The veil pulsed with their union. But deep inside her, something cracked open. She saw the shadow again, clearer now. A figure cloaked in sorrow, faceless yet familiar. It stood just beyond the circle, watching. Not interfering. Not yet. Cora tore her mouth from Aedan's, her body still trembling with aftershocks. This wasn't over. The wind shifted. Magic faltered. The first arrow struck the outer ring of stones with a shattering burst of light. Another followed. Then the growl, low, vicious packborn. Aedan stood in an instant, teeth bared, power radiating off him in waves. The enemy had found them. Figures emerged from the tree line, not rogues. Not the shattered pack remnants they'd escaped. Something worse. Wolves cloaked in midnight shadow, eyes glowing with unnatural light. Their scent twisted the air, wrong, corrupted. The same scent Cora had smelled the night of her mother's death. Her blood ran cold. The enemy wasn't just hunting them. It had been waiting, watching through the veil. And now, with the ritual unsealed, the path open, it had crossed through. Aedan stepped in front of her, shoulders squared, fury a living thing in his gaze. But Cora saw it, behind the rage, the fear. They were outnumbered. The veil unstable. The ritual incomplete. If they fought now, the bond might fracture. If they fled, the enemy might follow them across every border, through every hidden gate. She stood. The magic rose again, her body the conduit. The bond burned in her chest like a second heart. The shadow stepped forward from the tree line. It wasn't a wolf. It was him, the figure from the veil. Flesh now. Real. Terrible in his beauty, ancient in his stillness. And when his eyes met hers, she knew. He knew her name, knew her future. And if she didn't stop him now, he would tear Aedan from her arms, from her soul, and end everything they'd just begun. The forest exploded into chaos. And Cora screamed as the stones cracked beneath her feet and the veil split wide open. Chapter 8. The ground shivered with dread. Ash fell like morning snow as the moon veiled itself in cloud-wrought grief. The sky bled dark crimson at the edges, painting the forest in hues of foreboding. From the edge of the glen, where the sacred stones stood sentinel, came the low tremor of drums, ancient rhythms pulsing from the earth's memory, warning of the storm to come. They had no more time. The pack moved like shadows through the trees, taut with tension, fury sharpened into focus. No more running. No more hiding. Tonight, the curse would either be broken or consume them all. Aedan stood at the heart of it, bare-chested, wild-eyed, the runes carved into his skin with lunar ash and ironroot blood glowing faintly with the power Cora had summoned earlier. Power he'd resisted. Feared. Now there was no room for fear. Only fire. She stepped beside him, light-footed, cloaked in wind and fury. Cora's eyes were full of stormlight, their glow flickering like twin moons trapped behind storm clouds. The veil responded to her now, its fabric thinning around her presence, tendrils of cold mist curling at her heels, whispering, waiting. The pack formed a circle. A warded ring, marked with blood and bone, sage and salt. The old rites had begun. And from the far side of the glade, the shadows answered. They came in silence, no rustle of leaves, no snap of twigs. Just absence. Absence of warmth. Absence of breath. Figures in black, their faces hooded, their movements wrong. Liquid, boneless, serpentine. Not shifters. Not human. Something birthed in the pit of the veil's chaos. Cora's breath hitched. She could feel them, feel the gnawing hunger that crawled beneath their skin. They wanted not just blood or power. They wanted to unmake. To tear holes in reality and let the nothingness pour through. And at their heart, a figure stepped forward, taller than the rest, wrapped in a cloak woven from veil silk and nightmare. The ancient enemy. His presence pressed against the world like a storm surge, breaking the rules that held life and death apart. And when his hood fell, silence shattered. A face from memory, beautiful, cruel, ageless. Not wolf. Not man. Alpha, yes, but of a different breed. Born of the first sin of the shifter bloodline, a prince of ruin cast into the veil when the old gods still wept for their children. Aedan growled low in his throat, his body bristling with the instinct to shift, to protect. But Cora's hand brushed his arm. Not yet. The ritual was not complete. The stones around them flared brighter, one by one. The elements responding, fire to the north, wind to the east, water to the south, earth to the west. And at the center, spirit. Her. Cora stepped forward, her breath thick with power, her fingers glowing with the threads of the veil. She could feel the fabric of the curse now, not just a wound upon the world, but a knot twisted from grief, vengeance, and ancient betrayal. To unravel it, she had to walk the veil itself. But doing so meant leaving her body behind, trusting that Aedan could protect it, that he could protect her. And the pack, his voice, though unheard, pressed against her spirit like a brand. A promise and a plea. Don't go where I can't follow. She hesitated. Not from fear, but from the crushing weight of love. of knowing that if she stepped into the veil and failed, she would be lost to him forever. And if she didn't, they would all be lost anyway. The curse pulsed around them, a living thing, sensing her indecision. And the enemy smiled. He lifted his hands. The shadows answered. All at once, the glade exploded into chaos. The creatures surged forward, claws slicing through air, howls ripping through the trees. The warded ring flared in defense, holding barely. Wolves lunged from the shadows, the pack answering the call of blood and battle. Aedan transformed mid-motion, his form erupting into silver and black, for bristling fangs bared. He was the storm now, clashing with the enemy's beasts, tearing through shadow and sinew. But even he couldn't stop them all. Cora closed her eyes. She reached inward, through pain and love and fear, to the thread that bound her soul to the world. And she pulled. The veil tore. Reality bent inward. Wind screamed. Light shattered. And Cora vanished. Her body collapsed in the circle, untouched by time, suspended in twilight. Her spirit plunged into the veil, swallowed by silver mist and the ache of eternity. Aedan howled. He felt the bond snap tight, then stretch. Not broken, but distant, thin to a thread. His wolf snarled in denial, thrashing against the weight of loss. But there was no time. The enemy laughed, a sound like knives dragged over bone. With Cora gone, the ritual stood unguarded. And if the circle was breached before she returned, her soul would be stranded. Forever. Aedan leapt across the stones, slashing through 3 shadows in a blur of silver fury. Blood sizzled on the ward line, burning with unholy heat. His body ached, wounds piling deep, but he didn't slow. Couldn't. Inside the veil, Cora floated. She saw everything, moments caught in time, souls in pain, the origin of the curse carved into the roots of the world. A betrayal between blood. An alpha who sought to bend death itself. A child lost. A bond severed. Her own bloodline had carried it forward. She was the last echo of that curse. And now its breaker. A figure waited for her, wrapped in flame and sorrow. Not the enemy, but another, older still. A woman with eyes like her own. Her mother. Or what remained of her. They spoke without words. Memory and longing, grief and truth. And then the choice. To destroy the curse, Cora had to give up something more than power. She had to give up the right to return unchanged. To break the curse meant becoming part of the veil, forever marked, never wholly belonging to the world again. But it also meant saving them. Saving Aedan. She reached for the core of the curse, a seed of grief wrapped in a name she now knew. The enemy had once been like them. Loved lost. Twisted by sorrow. And in that knowing came understanding. But not forgiveness. She grasped the curse in both hands and screamed. Back in the glade, the air exploded. The enemy reeled, staggered. The shadow beasts shrieked, shriveling under a light that poured from the stones, white-hot, furious, alive. And Cora's body rose. Suspended above the circle, her limbs glowing, her hair lifting like flame. Her voice echoed through the trees. Not hers, not anymore, but something older. The curse cracked. But just as the circle reached its crescendo, just as the final rune lit with blinding force, the enemy struck. He vanished and reappeared within the circle, faster than thought, wreathed in smoke and hunger. His blade, a shard of the original veil, sliced through the ritual like a knife through silk. The world held its breath. The light faltered. Cora's body dropped. Aedan screamed, man, wolf, soul, diving forward as the enemy lunged for her heart. Too late. Cora vanished. Gone into the veil. Not body and soul. Just soul. The ritual shattered into silence. And Aedan was left kneeling in the ruins, her body cold in his arms, the bond gone dark. The curse undone. But at what cost? Chapter 9. The silence was absolute. Not the kind of silence born from peace or rest, but the kind that bloomed in the aftermath of something broken. Something sundered so deeply, even sound hesitated to follow. Cora stood on the edge of a chasm not made of stone but memory. All around her, the veil pulsed and breathed like a living thing, its folds of spectral mist thick and shifting, undulating like fabric caught in a slow, eternal tide. Color bled strangely here, moonlight casting hues that did not belong to the world she knew. Every step she took sank into shadow-soft ground, yet weightless, like her soul wandered unmoored while her body barely existed. And yet she did exist. She felt it in her bones, in the ache at the base of her spine, in the fire still smoldering beneath her breastbone, where her bond with Aedan burned like a beacon through the cold. But he was gone. No, not gone, left behind. The moment she crossed the veil, she'd heard his roar. Not a call. Not a command. A rupture. As if something inside him had broken when her body vanished into light and mist. She had wanted to turn back. To reach through that thinning membrane and anchor herself to his scent, his warmth, his steady, maddening strength. But the path had closed behind her, sealed with the whispering kiss of ancient magic. Now the only way forward was deeper. She moved with caution, yet urgency hummed in her every movement. The veil was not just a place. It was a memory, a wound, a dream layered in pain. Whispers crawled along her skin, voices not spoken aloud but embedded in her thoughts. You are not enough. You will break like the others. You will choose wrong. But she pressed forward. A glimmer shivered in the air ahead, brighter than the twilight surrounding her. It pulsed with rhythm, like a heartbeat. Not hers. Not Aedan's. Something else. The terrain shifted beneath her. Trees rose where there had been none, tall and twisted, their bark slick with silvered runes. The branches stretched wide overhead, blotting out the stars. A corridor of fate, ancient and merciless. She followed it. Each step drew her deeper into the heart of the realm, where time did not obey rules and emotion became manifest. Grief whispered in gusts of wind that didn't exist. Regret hung heavy in the mist. The scent of crushed roses, dried blood, and distant thunder swirled around her like a shroud. Then she saw him. At the center of the clearing, seated upon a throne of bone and obsidian, lounged a figure cloaked in darkness, so dense it warped the very air. His skin was pale, so pale it almost shone, and his eyes held the eerie luminance of a black sun, devouring rather than reflecting light. The Shadow Alpha. He did not rise, did not speak. He only smiled. And in that smile, the whole world shuddered. Cora's pulse hammered. Her hands curled into fists, the ancient symbols of her bloodline flaring to life along her forearms in threads of white-blue flame. She stepped forward, steady, though the air thickened, resisting her with every stride. He raised a single hand, and the veil rippled. Suddenly, she stood not in the glade but in the remnants of a battlefield. Her wolves. Her people. Aedan. All strewn in twisted, lifeless heaps. Smoke curled from shattered trees. The scent of death clogged her throat. Her knees buckled. But it wasn't real. Was it? She closed her eyes. Reached inward. Past fear. Past fury. To the place where Aedan's presence lived, no matter the distance. She inhaled. And there he was. Fractured but whole. Hurting but alive. Reaching for her in his own way. The illusion dissolved with the force of her will. She stood again in the glade. The Shadow Alpha clapped once, slowly. Mocking. He rose now, robes trailing like smoke across the silvered ground. Closer. His presence distorted everything. The air thickened with decay. And power. You wanted truth, his voice seemed to say, though no sound passed his lips. Then see. The mists twisted. And suddenly Cora stood within the past. Her mother, weeping over her father's broken form. A betrayal forged in blood. The curse, born not from a stranger's hatred, but from a pact broken. A promise shattered. The veil's curse had not been an accident. It had been vengeance. A punishment passed through generations. You were always meant to pay the price, the voice rasped again, within her skull. Cora staggered. The truth felt like razors. And yet, deeper than the pain, something else stirred. A quiet strength. A flame not easily extinguished. She remembered Aedan's touch. The way his hands trembled when he thought she wouldn't notice. The way his gaze clung to her like a prayer. She remembered his voice, fierce and broken, as she vanished. His love had never been easy, never soft, but it had been true. And she remembered her wolves. Her people. No curse would dictate her path. When she looked up, her eyes burned with light of their own, silver and ancient. You think you are the first to try, the Shadow Alpha breathed, amused. You think love is your weapon. It is your weakness. I will show you. The veil exploded around her. Shards of memory. Screams. Laughter. Her own face, younger, terrified. Aedan chained. Her brother dying. Her wolves, twisted into monsters. Choice after choice, regret after regret. She stood in the storm of it all, and did not fall. Because love, when forged through fire, became more than weakness. It became a shield. And then, Aedan's presence burst through like a sudden sunrise. She didn't see him, but she felt him. He wasn't in the veil, but his soul reached anyway. Raw emotion pulsing like wildfire. Grief, terror, hope, all bound to her. His heart called out, not with words, but with need. She gritted her teeth, pushed against the Shadow Alpha's tide, stepped forward. Light spilled from her skin now, not harsh but resolute. Every wound she'd endured, every choice she'd questioned, had carved this strength into her bones. She walked to him. The Dark Alpha faltered. Just once. And then he smiled again. But this smile was different. Wounded. Because he knew. She could win. Unless. The sky above the veil fractured like glass. A hole opened. A vision, not illusion but real. Aedan knelt over her body. Her real body. Motionless. Unbreathing. He howled, not as an alpha, not as a warrior, but as a man lost. And then, the Shadow Alpha whispered one final truth. You must choose. The vision shimmered, her pack surrounded, crumbling under a renewed attack outside the veil. Shadows swarmed them. They needed her. Now. But if you return to them, the voice said, soft as a knife, you will not reach him in time. Aedan will die before your soul returns. 2 paths. 2 hearts. 1 life. Save the pack, or save Aedan. The veil pulsed, demanding choice. And Cora stood in the center of it all, heart-shattering, power-thrumming, as everything she loved waited to be lost. Chapter 10. The air tasted like blood and iron, thick with the scent of endings. Smoke curled upward in wisps, winding around the ragged trees of the veil like mourning veils of their own. Time bent strangely here. Heartbeats stretched into eternities. Each breath drawn felt carved from stone, a reluctant act of survival. Cora stood at the threshold, shoulders trembling beneath the weight of a choice that had splintered something sacred inside her. The Shadow Alpha's ultimatum still echoed in her mind, its cruelty etched into the marrow of her bones. Save the pack, or save Aedan. And she had chosen. The moment of sacrifice still played behind her eyes, a memory too fresh, too raw. Her scream, torn from her throat like a soul being ripped in two. Aedan's face, seared in that last flash of golden light, had held no fear, only trust. And love. That love had shattered something within her, and rebuilt it in the same breath. She fell to her knees among the dying roots, palms pressed to the cold earth. The veil pulsed beneath her skin, its ancient rhythm disrupted, agitated. The Shadow Alpha's presence had vanished, his power driven back by her choice, her refusal to yield. But it wasn't victory. Not really. Not yet. Ash fell from the sky like gray snow, settling on her hair, her lashes, her blood-slicked hands. The landscape of the veil cracked and heaved, splitting like glass under pressure. Every fracture whispered with the voices of the cursed, the long dead, the nearly forgotten. Their pain reached for her in tendrils of wind and memory. But something else stirred. Deep in her chest, beneath the sorrow and exhaustion, burned a heat that would not die. The bond. Not severed. Changed. Cora rose on unsteady legs. The ground trembled beneath her boots, as if the realm itself groaned under the weight of the curse unraveling. She turned toward the hollow space where Aedan had stood, where his presence had been torn from hers, and felt him. Faint, but there. The tether between them had frayed, not snapped. A silken thread of light pulled tight between two souls stretched across dimensions. Her breath hitched. He was alive. Somewhere. Somehow. She pressed a hand to her chest and let the warmth bloom, curling through her ribs like fire licking at old wounds. She would not grieve him yet. With the curse unraveling, the veil began to break apart, not in fury, but in release. Trees that had long since died shimmered with color for the briefest of seconds before turning to dust. The river that once ran black turned silver and flowed backward, as if time itself had chosen to forgive. And in the center of it all stood the heart of the veil, a clearing bathed in violet twilight, pulsing like a heartbeat. Cora stepped into it, her boots stirring the scattered ash, her gaze drawn to the crystal embedded in the earth. The source. It had once been pure. The root of life that connected the spiritual and the physical. But centuries of hatred, vengeance, and blood had twisted it. The curse had made a parasite of it. And now it wept. She reached for it. Her fingers hovered over its surface, and memory struck like a blade. Her mother's lullaby, whispered in the dark. Aedan's arms around her, holding her together when the world had tried to break her apart. The wolves of the pack, standing behind her in battle, broken but unyielding. Strength in vulnerability. Power in unity. Love, not control. Cora's palm met the crystal. The world convulsed. A scream tore through the air, no, not hers. The Shadow Alpha's final wail, drawn from the depths of 1,000 tormented lifetimes, echoing across the realm like thunder. The veil erupted in light. Blinding. Cleansing. Consuming. She fell. Light swallowed her whole. And then silence. When she woke, the stars were gone. The veil had collapsed into a fine mist that drifted on the breeze, no longer a place, but a memory. She stood at the edge of the hollow, where the true world met the edges of the unseen. Trees whispered in the wind, whole and green. The earth was solid beneath her feet, not pulsing with pain, but resting. And she wasn't alone. One by one, wolves emerged from the trees, her pack. Some limping, some bloodied, all breathing. All alive. Elia came first, her eyes rimmed red, jaw clenched with grief and awe. She dropped to her knees and pressed her forehead to Cora's, murmuring thanks not in words, but in the way a soul recognizes salvation. Behind her, the others gathered, Kieran, half carried by Alric, the twins wounded but whole, every face marked by war and hope. They had survived, but he wasn't among them. Cora searched the tree line again and again, waited for that ripple of presence, that warmth that always told her he was near. But the bond remained dim, distant. Not broken. Not close. Time passed without meaning. They returned to the den in solemn procession, the trees parting before them as if acknowledging their trial, their triumph. Rebuilding began not with hammers, but with tears, with embraces long overdue, with silent gratitude and the aching hollowness of those who had not returned. The pack mourned and healed. Cora walked the den's perimeter alone, the ruins of what had been both sanctuary and battleground scattered like relics of another life. Her fingers brushed the stones, the timber, the blood-stained ground. Aedan's name remained unspoken on every lip, but it beat like thunder in every heart. She felt him in the wind, in the way the moon lingered longer now in the sky, unwilling to set. She felt him in the ache behind her ribs, where something vital had been pulled taut and refused to release. Days blurred. At the edge of the clearing where the veil had once stood, Cora planted a stone, a sentinel, carved with the sigils of old, lit by the last embers of the crystal's light. She watched the flame flicker, never extinguishing. She didn't sleep that night. The stars hung low, veiled in silver mist, and her thoughts roamed. If love was a bond unbroken by death, then perhaps it could be unbroken by distance too. The tether still pulsed faintly, a golden thread brushing the edges of her consciousness. She closed her eyes and reached. Not with hands, not with words, with heart, and the world shifted. A pulse, a heartbeat not her own, a feeling like hands brushing hers in the dark. Heat bloomed swift and wild. A presence, a whisper, not from the bond, from the veil. A breath, soft as ash stirring on wind. Not gone, not yet. Her eyes snapped open. The flame atop the sentinel stone flared, then darkened to deep red. Smoke curled upward, dancing in unnatural patterns. The mist coalesced. A shape formed, slender, hunched, cloaked in shadow. Not Aedan. Not friend. The whisper came again. Inhuman. Silk over blades. He is not the only one left behind. The shape dissolved. But the cold remained. Cora turned slowly, heart pounding, breath shallow. Beyond the edge of the hollow, the mist thickened once more. No longer passive. No longer just memory. Something stirred in the space between what had ended and what had begun. Something watching. Waiting. And the bond flared. Aedan's heartbeat panicked. Alive. But no longer alone. Darkness was not finished with them. Not yet. Epilogue. The first light of dawn stretched across the horizon like liquid silver, spilling over the ridge of ancient hills and brushing the tops of the evergreens with gentle fire. Mist clung to the forest floor, a soft veil that blurred the line between earth and sky, waking the world with quiet magic. It was a morning stitched from hope and breath, a fragile promise cradled in the arms of new beginnings. Cora stood at the edge of the clearing where the sentinel stone still stood, its flame a steady glow against the pale light. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, familiar, grounding. Her breath came slow and steady, a rhythm carved through months of healing and battle, loss and love. The weight in her chest was lighter now, shaped less by grief than by a fierce determination that had settled deep like roots in winter-hardened soil. Beside her, Aedan moved with the fluid grace of a shadow drawn into dawn's embrace. His presence was both a balm and a blaze, steady strength wrapped in fierce tenderness. His eyes, once haunted by darkness, now reflected the calm dawn sky, bright and clear as a promise unbroken. The bond between them pulsed softly, a living thread woven from their shared trials, stretching across distance and time, unyielding. Around them, the pack stirred, their breathing deep and even, the quiet murmur of life reclaiming what had been nearly lost. Limbs stretched, muscles flexed, and silent glances exchanged spoke of scars worn like medals, of battles survived not just in body but in spirit. They were whole again, shaped by fire but tempered by love and loyalty, a pack reborn in the ashes of shadow. Cora's fingers brushed the sentinel stone, tracing the sigils with reverence. The flame flickered in answer, a heartbeat of light that warmed the cool air. It was more than a marker of sacrifice. It was a beacon, a declaration that the past had been faced and overcome, but that vigilance must remain. Shadows may recede, but they never truly vanish. Her gaze lifted to the horizon, where the sun now climbed with steady grace, chasing the last tendrils of night. Each ray spilled like molten hope, casting long, golden fingers that reached into the forest's depths, stirring life awake. The veil's shadows had faded, but its memory lingered, an echo, a warning whispered on the wind. Aedan's hand found hers, fingers curling with the certainty of a promise forged in fire and shadow. The connection between them thrummed with quiet strength, a tether that neither distance nor darkness could sever. In that touch lay the weight of their journey. The battles fought, the love claimed, the future forged in fragile light. Together, they turned toward the rising sun, silhouettes outlined in dawn's glow. Two souls intertwined, standing on the precipice of what was and what could be. The world stretched vast and wild before them, filled with both peril and possibility, danger and desire. In the soft silence between breaths, a single truth settled. This was not an end, but a beginning. The wind carried it, gentle and sure. A whisper beneath the silver dawn. This is just the beginning. Thank you for joining us on I Love Romance Stories. Stay tuned for more tales of love and danger under the moon.